A night on the res. I decided to join my bestie Karen for a 3-day stay at her grandmother's place on the res. Her grandmother lives near a place called Tuba City, Arizona. It's in the middle of nowhere, but surrounded by rural homes. We go to college together, and I was kind of interested to know about Navajo traditions. And the first day we stayed, it was pretty chill. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then her grandmother, not really that old, maybe around 67, said that a stray dog came out of nowhere and wouldn't leave. To me, it did act kind of strange, and it was ugly looking. Black, shaggy coat like a mix between a German Shepherd and a Lab. That night, we were watching a movie in the living room. It had big windows that looked out into the front where the cars were parked, nothing fancy, and the curtains were wide open. Grandma was in the kitchen cooking dinner, and next to the window was a medium bookshelf where there were DVDs and stuff. Karen went to put back a DVD that we had just watched, but she freaked out because that stray black dog was staring at us through the window, standing on top of the wooden box that happened to be outside. Not something normal dogs do from my point of view, or hers. Usually, my dog, which is a house dog, scratches at the door to be let in. Res dogs aren't house dogs, and dogs inside houses are frowned upon in Navajo tradition as far as I know. They're meant to protect the house and the owner. The other dogs also seemed to stay away from this strange, stray dog, and Karen opened the door and yelled at it to get off the box, and it ran off behind the shed. We went to Tuba City to get some groceries, and came back to the house, and the dog was nowhere to be seen, nothing unusual. Grandma went to visit some people, so it was just Karen and I in the house, and about 5 o'clock we heard someone trying to open the door. Both of us looked out since there had been no car heard and there were no dogs barking. Looking out of the living room window to the door, there was the dog trying to open the door with its paws. 2 paws wrapped around the brass doorknob, standing on its hind legs all the while. I thought that was weird, but wasn't really freaked out. But Karen was. She opened the door and chased it off, and Grandma came back later, and Karen told her. Grandma didn't like what she heard. She got ready to sleep, and we slept in the spare bedroom since it had 2 beds, one window with curtains opened a little bit. We turned off the light, but there was a sound coming from on top of the roof. The pitter-patter of footsteps, and scratching sounds, and panting. It then sounded like it jumped off onto a large plastic water barrel that they had outside. At first we heard what sounded like barking, but as it grew louder, the other dogs seemed to be barking at something also. All of a sudden, something was running around the house barking, and it was no dog. Nope, it wasn't. This barking sounded human, a deep male voice barking like it knew that we knew it wasn't a dog. Just this woof, woof, ruff, woof, arf, arf. Just like that. Added in the W's and R's and the A's, make your mind up. But then it was panting again by the window, and we started freaking out. Karen decided to, and in my opinion this was a stupid idea, open the curtains to look out. And there was the stray dog, on its hind legs, looking into our bedroom window. But this time it stunk. And I thought there were 2 black holes in its neck and another pair of eyes twinkled. Think of those ugly, glossy spider eyes staring at you. And its paws were deformed-looking hands with overgrown, somewhat thick and sharp fingernails. We both screamed and shut the curtains closed, and Grandma came running in through the door and saw it. The first thing she did was grab ashes from the fireplace, loaded 3 shells into her shotgun from under her bed, blessed herself in Navajo, and went outside to shoot it. She yelled at it in Navajo and told it it wasn't welcome here, and to get the hell away, and for it to go linger somewhere else. They were very traditional, and the next day they called a medicine man to come over and put cedar around. He prayed over everyone with cedar smoke and an eagle feather. He blessed the place, made us eat bitter herbs called eagle's gull or something like that, and he gave me an arrowhead. Apparently, I needed to carry one for protection, and he also gave me a little pouch called corn pollen. It seemed to work pretty well. The medicine man said that the dog was a skinwalker, which in Navajo is a long word, but I call them Yoshis. It was the body of a stray dog which had been killed by the skinwalker, and it was making an illusion so we wouldn't know it wasn't a real dog. He also said that Yoshis tend to harm people by using some sort of bone straw to spit at them. Think spitballs, only deadlier. They say doctors can't detect it, but the medicine man said that he had pulled a piece of human skull out of Grandma's right shoulder. It was pretty big, about 2 inches long and 1 centimeter thick. And it was real because we watched him pull it out of her. That was intense. The Bear by Pacific Kestrel. I was on a road trip with a friend, and we hiked into a trail in Colorado one evening to camp so we wouldn't have to pay for a campsite. We found a little clearing by a stream, and my friend set up a tent while I decided to sleep under the stars. Right as we were getting ready to go to sleep, another woman showed up and pitched her tent in the clearing as well. I hadn't been feeling well that day, and plus we had the hike in with all of our stuff, so when I slept hard. I woke up to a ranger shaking me and asking if I saw where the bear went. Bear? What bear? Then I looked up and saw the woman's tent just shredded. Turns out she had left her food in her tent that night, and we had hung ours from a tree. A curious bear came by at like 4 a.m. to have a snack, and in tearing into her tent, it ended up raking its claws across her forehead as well. She decided to get the fuck out, though why she didn't bother waking either me or my friend up to let us know that this very hungry bear was nearby, I don't know. Anyway, pretty freaky thing to wake up to. I have no idea how I slept through it, and that's what made it even more confusing and freaky when I was woken up by the ranger. I was definitely really tired and, like I said, not feeling so great, so I know I crashed hard. We were also by a creek, so there was definitely some white noise of the water flowing, and the woman who was on the other side of the clearing, so not right next to us, but she was just amazingly calm in this situation. Was she freaking out in total silence? I don't know. She arrived pretty late in the evening, and we didn't talk to her, so maybe that's why she just passed on by her way out. But we were 2 other females camping out there with her, so I'd like to think if the roles were reversed, I would have woken up my neighbors, or even asked them for help. I wouldn't call it a bear attack, more like the bear smelled something yummy in that tent, and upon cursory examining of the object blocking said bear from that yummy smell, it realized that it could easily bypass the object with its claws. So I don't think it was like a, "Roar, let's kill this tent and all its occupants right now so I can get this food." More like a, "Hey, something smells good in there, and my claws can get through this thing just fine. Let me scratch a bit more and make sure I can get in." And in the process of getting in there, the claws also scratched the woman's head. Yeah, that's camping in bear country. If you can't put your food in a bear box at an established campground, put your food in a bear canister, often used by backpackers, or put your food in your car in places where bears haven't learned how to peel back car doors like a can opener. Don't put your food in your car in Yosemite, though. If you can hang your food from a tree, hang it far enough away from the trunk on a thin enough branch that the bear wouldn't be able to climb up to it, and far enough off the ground that the bear can't reach it by standing on their hind legs. If you get a bear on a unicycle or stilts coming through your camp, though, all bets are off. A Bigfoot Tale by The Goat Man. I moved to the southeast of the Coliston Valley near the Oregon-California border around 1976. I was young, a hippie, and in love with a little red-haired girl named Autumn. I'd met her in Redondo Beach earlier that same winter, and after sparking a couple up, we talked all afternoon and evening on the beach about the beautiful Pacific Northwest. She mentioned she was from there originally, and I had visited a couple of times and loved it as well. We decided to head to Eureka a few days later, and upon arriving there, we headed up to Ashland, Oregon, and we loved it. However, it was still a town, and we wanted to live wild in the woods, to be honest. Yeah, we were those kinds of hippies. We camped out first just on the southeast side of Grizzly Peak. We were there for about a year, and between walking into town to get some social time in with the locals and scouting out new places to live, we finally found one. We had decided to head down the Pacific Crest Trail, and this would take us up near over Mount Ashland. From there we spotted the Coliston Valley area, and to the southwest of that was forest, thick, green, beautiful Pacific Northwest forest as far as you could see. We hiked for about 15 or so miles, it seemed, but it was not all that far, and we could still just see Mount Ashland from some vantage points, like Pilot Rock. We settled in, and here we would grow. Yeah, some weed to make money, and we would be together for as long as we could, or were allowed, if you will. We were never bothered by a soul, nor did we ever see a Forest Service person or a cop. We were left alone, completely alone, just nature and us. We lived there for 15 years until Autumn got breast cancer and passed on at a pretty early age. But enough of the old days. Let me tell you what happened to me one time on the way back from town to our home in the woods. Autumn was getting to that point that we thought there might be something seriously wrong with her. She was about 40 years old, and I was 42 when she became ill. She had a bad cold at the time, and it had lasted more than a couple of days without her getting any better, so a trip to town would need to be made, and I needed to get some medicine for her, and our stuff was not helping. It would take me about 22 hours to get there and back. Like I said, we were living near the border of California, about 15 to 20 miles from Ashland, the nearest town. This would take walking a trail that actually, and some people still know about it, takes you from the southwest side of the mountain, over it, and down smack into the top of Lithia Park. However, I would be derailed and almost killed, I believed, by Bigfoot along the way. I moved rather quickly when I started my trek. I hated it when she was sick. It just made me sad. It would take me until early evening or late afternoon at least to get there from where I was, and thank goodness for the straight shot along that trail I mentioned. Otherwise, I would be walking all the way around the mountain, and that would take longer. Then again, maybe I should have. I made it to Ashland around 7 or 8 p.m. that evening. Fortunately, Bi-Mart was still open, so I could go load up on those chemically enhanced man-made cold medications we were trying to avoid. I grabbed 2 bags of cough drops, a fever reducer, and 2 bottles of that 44 stuff that was supposed to be like green moonshine in a bottle. I would also run into town, down to the plaza, and sell a little smoke to make my money back, plus some. It wasn't even 10 p.m. by the time I sold a bag and was ready to head back. I didn't want to rest just yet. I was really worried about Autumn, and this cold of hers seemed different, not your typical cold and fever. I ended up 3/4 of the way up Mount Ashland before the fight for my life would begin, however. These were the days when solar-powered flashlights existed, but only lasted about 10 minutes or so. But that was okay, it took batteries too, so I switched over to those. I was coming around a particular bend when I felt, well, a little off, or weirded out, if you will. I know, I smoke weed and paranoia is part of the high, but I was sober by this point, trust me. I smoked less than the college kids that bought it from me, and anyways, I felt as though I was being watched and followed at this point. I never heard anything weird, nor had Autumn, or had I ever seen evidence of Bigfoot up until that time, and we lived up there by that point for years. But that does not mean they were never around. Maybe they are or were from time to time, and they simply avoided us. Who knows? Either way, I was suddenly spooked when I started to hear something off in the woods, maybe 30 to 40 yards away. It was walking along with me. And that's what was weirding me out, man. I was not alone. I was being followed. I kept walking and even sped up a little bit, and I could still hear it as it followed me. And this was so creepy, dude, whatever it was. It was walking on 2 legs. I figured it could be some of those new forest people I'd been hearing about. If you don't know, these people are not like me in Autumn. These types of people are reckless, dangerous, and are actually all out mean. People like them should be avoided, always. Why are they mean and, well, crazy? I don't know. Who am I to judge someone else? Either way, I thought perhaps I was going to be confronted by one or more of them. As I sped up and started to hit the first of 3 major inclines that would last for a few miles or so each, I could still hear the footsteps beside me, again, about 30 yards or so in the thick of the trees. Again, following. To tell you the truth, whoever it was at the time, well, they didn't seem like they were trying to hide the fact that they were there. I guess that's what really got to me. They didn't care about the sound they were making. They knew I could hear them. I kept up the pace, and so did they. Well, what I would know to be a Bigfoot eventually. I was starting to head downhill as the trees opened up to an almost treeless mountainside, and the stars and the moon lit up a small little dip between the hill I was leaving and the next one I would be heading up. That's when the shrieks started. High-pitched screams I had never heard before, and ones that would put Sam Kinison to shame. It was loud, brother, loud and scary. I thought at first that a half-lion, half-hyena was loose, and that was until I thought it turned into a full-on laughing hyena. Creepy, I thought. It was something you didn't want to hear when tripping out, I can tell you. It let out a second scream, I remember, as I headed into the clearing and down the hill. I knew this trail like you know the streets you live on and around. By that time, I traveled them countless times. Not once did I hear or see anything like this before, but that doesn't mean they or it was never there. At this point in time, for some reason, it just wanted to be known or had some nefarious idea in mind about me. Either way, that second scream seemed like it stopped back where I was seconds before, as if the creature stopped before the open field below us. I turned to look, and that's when I saw something. Well, the outline of something enormous standing between 2 large trees. I don't remember if any of you recall that show, The $6 Million Man. Well, not that I'm telling you that this is what this thing looked like, but it almost ran as fast as a $6 Million Man could. First, let me say this. My heart practically stopped when I saw the size of that outline swaying in the trees, and it was swaying just before it ran. Compared to the trees, I can tell you that this thing was at least 9 feet tall, at least. And I know, you probably think I'm high right now, or then, but I'm not, and I was not. At that moment, my mind caught up with the situation. I still had a long way to go, and maybe a short time to get there. And what I saw next, well, that short time was running shorter than I thought. This creature, which I took to be a Bigfoot at the moment, bolted from one side of that open area to below me in seconds. I mean, seconds, man! Each stride had to be at least one of me, and I'm 6 foot exactly. And I was right about that height. 9 feet tall was spot on, I thought. I could also tell by the light of the full moon that it was covered in hair because it flowed as he or she or whatever it was ran. I started to do the hustle at that point myself, and I knew that it knew I was there, and I had a feeling deep down that it was not a friendly creature. It was stalking me. I made it to the trees and started up the second hill that I would need to climb, and after that, a smaller one would be that last thing between me, camp, and this Bigfoot thing. It kept crashing through the woods, screaming all the while, too. I could also hear it as it seemed to be snapping off limbs of trees as it walked, as it stalked me. I was huffing and puffing by that point, man, and my heart was pounding. However, as I felt my jacket pocket, I could feel the medication that Autumn needed, and I knew right then I needed to make it back to her. I started walking even faster. Some young folks today would call it speed walking, I suppose, but I just called it scared as all get-out walking. It always stayed about the same distance from me in the trail as I could tell. As I came to the end of that second climb, I was breathing hard and thanking the Almighty I was about to head downhill. I had to stop, though, just for a minute to catch my breath. I got to the open area at the top of the hill and stood for just a minute. that thing stopped too. But this time, I could sense it was closer to me, not as far as I thought it was before. I was about to move again when a stick, or a large limb more like it, came flying through the moonlit night from inside the line right at me. It landed next to me, and that is because I moved. That thing tried to hit me with a large limb. I started to turn and pick up the pace again when all of a sudden I was charged. I have to tell you, I dove forward, rolling and getting up immediately to my feet and running away. It literally sounded like it was crashing through the trees and brush right at me, so I reacted. I looked behind me and saw nothing at first. I got another 30 or 40 feet and looked again, and this time, that thing sprinted again through the open area to the tree line right ahead of me. This time, I noticed it was closer, and it seemed as if it was trying to cut me off. I got to the tree line seconds later myself and stopped again for a few seconds. I needed to know how close that thing was. I put my ear to the ground, as they say, and everything got real quiet. Nothing. Not a sound from anything. I was scared as well. I'll keep it clean here for you, but I was all of a sudden scared. I pushed on, but this time at almost a slow jogging pace. Like I said, I knew this country, this trail, but I couldn't afford to hurt myself or fall and break the bottles of cough medicine and so on. The last hill was in sight, and I started to feel good, but that was short-lived. Just as all hope was felt, it vanished as a scream came from the left side of me that sent me almost crashing into a tree on the side of the trail. This creature was closer, like 15-20 yards away close. I gathered myself quickly and felt around for something, anything I could protect myself with. A large, broken, dead limb was all I could find, and, a rock, I recall. I threw the rock into the woods and started running again, and this time I was running like that Forrest guy in the movie. You know, run, Forrest, run! As I did, I watched while another large limb came flying out from the trees and hit me in the shoulder. It hurt, but it was more like a Charlie horse, you know? But it hit me nonetheless, slowing me down. Another scream and the crashing through the woods came again, and I could feel the earth beneath me, man. It was vibrating more than a Jamaican to some great music. This thing was close, and it wanted me. It was at that moment that I felt like I was in real trouble, serious trouble. Fast was not the word. I was running faster than I had since I was 10 years old, and I tell you, I ran and ran so fast, I was heading up the other hill before I knew it. And Prefontaine had nothing on me that night, dude. As I ran, I could hear that thing to the right of me, running and hollering at me. So far, though, and I knew it could catch me at any time if it wanted, it hadn't. It just ran beside me, shadowing me. But I have to tell you, I think if this was going to go on any longer than it did at this point, and I think it would have, I really thought I was being hunted down, but maybe I was simply being toyed with up to that point. Like a cat with a mouse. I felt I was being played with before certain execution. Then, home, at last. Praise the Lord, I was home. It usually takes almost all day to get back, but with all that running for my life, well, I was running through the last mile before the sun was even peeking up or looking to peek over the mountains. However, that thing was still there, still following me, and every time I stopped, it would stop and immediately charge me through the brush and leaves. It would come within yards of me, so close in fact, I got a good look during that last stretch of trail. It looked angry, mad. Its eyes were squinty, small and dark. It looked like, well, I'm not sure what to compare it to other than an ape, a two-legged ape that stood at least 3 or more heads above me. It had a small mouth that at that point was in kind of a cringing shape. It was hairy, but I couldn't really tell if it was brown or black or what. It was still too dark to see at that point. It was huffing or breathing really heavy as it stood there. And before I could look away and start the quick pace up again, this thing let out a scream that even Autumn heard from that far away. She would ask me what it was when I entered camp minutes later. It was so loud I covered my ears, turned, and literally started to run for my life. It was about 15 minutes later, and I finally saw the light of day coming up out of the east, and I could see a campfire through the trees ahead of me. Again, I was home at last. Scared, but never scared enough to move to town, and that was how I felt, even though Autumn told me she heard that last scream and it made her shudder a bit. We decided to move, and not just because of that incident, but because that screaming continued for, well, as long as we stayed there. Every night, in the distance, we could hear that thing, that Bigfoot scream and holler, and we felt like it was directed at us. We moved, and it took a few trips to get everything as we moved southeast of Ashland, just over to the other side of Grizzly Park. It was not long after that Autumn would soon learn she had cancer, and soon, one fall morning, I took her to the hospital where she wouldn't last a week. We retold the interesting stories of our adventures, and especially of the Bigfoot incident, and how she was really scared for me over those last few days. Autumn slipped away into the universe, and I back into the wilds. I've never heard or seen anything like it since that time, since the last move at least, nor do I wish to. I love nature, man, but sometimes what is out there, well, it's not so nice, I think. Skinwalker Stalking Me by Keegan. When I was around 10 years old, I had some friends over for a birthday sleepover. It was around 3 in the morning, and we got hungry, so we went to my kitchen and began to make some sandwiches. And when I looked outside of my sliding glass door, I saw something on my porch silhouetted in the darkness. I turned on the porch light and had the life scared out of me. There was a huge thing on my porch. It was a man-sized dog-looking thing with these glowing reddish-yellowy eyes, huge fangs, and its body was pink and hairless. It dashed off into my field at the sight of me, and I swore I saw it turn into a human and keep running. My friends saw it too, but not the part where it turned into a man. Okay, fast forward about 7 years, April 20th, 2014. It was 2 a.m., and I had a few friends over, and I heard something on my porch yet again. I looked out the window and couldn't see anything, so I looked at my friends, shrugged, and then looked back out the window. A face appeared out of nowhere, and I fell back in shock. I looked back out of the window to see this person running away, but he turned into something with a tail and 4 legs and kept running down my driveway. Nobody else saw him transform this time either. Then, just a few nights ago, I saw this thing again. I was downstairs making a sandwich in the middle of the night, and I realized someone was trying to open the sliding glass door from the outside. I turned on the porch light, and there it was. Something about 6 feet tall, with the head, arms, and legs of a fox, clutching a tall staff, and it was pawing at the outside of the door near the handle, trying to get in. Its face was painted with some kind of symbols. I lived near a reservation, and they looked vaguely Navajo, and as was its entire body painted as well. I fell over and then scrambled back upstairs, where I clutched a knife in my bed for the rest of the night. I think I'm being stalked by an ancient Anasazi witch, otherwise known as a skinwalker. I'm scared to sleep or look out my window at night, and I don't know what to do. If anybody has tips on how to get rid of them, that would be much appreciated. Wolves. Me and 2 buddies took a road trip through northern Spain on our bikes, and for some unknown reason ended up in a small town between Cordoba and Toledo. Why we picked that certain dirt road, I have no idea, but it was about 5 miles long and dead-ended right into this village. The village was situated into something like a cul-de-sac, in that it was surrounded on all sides by canyon walls, and it had one main street going down the middle, and a couple of tiny small streets leading to scattered houses and such. So we go into what we think is a store, but was actually a venta, so we sat down, and an older lady came out and looked very surprised to see us. She turned around and a little while later came back with what ended up being her husband. We asked him in Spanish if he had anything to eat or drink, and he asked us where we were from. We told him America, and he and his wife again retreated into a back room. About this time, we figured that they didn't have anything, so we were getting up to leave, and 3 more men walked in and asked us if we were Americans. We found out right then that only one person in the whole town had ever met an American. Next thing we know, there are about 20 people out in the street looking at our bikes, then starting to ask us questions. Then the original old lady and man started moving tables and chairs outside, and in about 20 minutes, we were sitting there eating and drinking with the whole town. So we went late into the night and decided to stay in a shed behind one of the houses. When we went in, the old man we originally met gave us some bottles of wine and some bread and olives and told us to not go outside until morning. We asked him why, and he said because of the wolves. Whatever, we thought, and continued drinking until we fell asleep. The next morning, my buddy went outside to take a whiz, and I heard him scream, "Holy shit, look at this!" We went outside, and right to the right side of the shed was a deer that had been split open from throat to ass, all its bones sticking up, and not one piece of flesh on it. Next to my bike was what looked like the remains of a small pig. Not a drop of blood anywhere. Not on the ground, not on the bikes, or on the bodies. And we never heard anything the whole night before. Hey gang, thanks for listening to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Much more to come as the summer months progress, and I'd love to hear your scary stories. Send them to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Follow me on social media. All of the links to my outlets are in the description below. And of course, if you want to support me on Patreon, feel free to do that. There's a link for that as well. Any amount that you send me keeps this channel running. For those of you that like Uncle Josh in more of a podcast format, you can find me on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, iHeart, Spotify, and more. Thanks again, and until next time, be excellent to each other. And remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.